to the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. We are proclaiming liberty one show at a time, and the next one starts right now. How's it going? It's Clint Armitage, and this is the Liberty Podcast. Okay, so now we are in kind of a part 2 of the episode series that we're working on, and it's called The Signs of Judgment. And we're relating this to a book that came out in 2012, actually, I believe, named The Harbinger, written by author Jonathan Cahn, who's a rabbi and a Messianic Jew. So we had talked about in the previous episode, part 1, we had mentioned all of the different harbingers that are listed in the book. There's 9 different harbingers. Now, this episode, we're going to take a look at the harbingers. We're going to start it out. We'll start at 1 and we'll see how far it gets us. But we're going to start with looking at the first harbinger, or the first sign. And now the first sign I had mentioned before in the last episode is the breach. Okay, the breach. And what the author is relating is that in 732 BC, the Assyrian terrorists, or the Assyrian army, attacked Israel. And so doing a little bit of research on that timeline and with what happened with Israel and all that, it looks like in 732 BC, the Assyrians began their campaign against Israel. Again, Israel, the northern kingdom, and started their campaign against them and started to attack them at that time. And now the author, Jonathan Cahn, actually relates 9/11 in America because it was Arab terrorists attacking America, and the Arabs, he says the Arabs are descendants of the Assyrians. Now, the Assyrians did in fact start a campaign against Israel in 732 BC. Now, what I can't find is, during the research, I could not find an actual strike where the walls were taken down, because again, he's relating it to 9/11, where there was a first strike, a breach in the wall. And I couldn't find sources that actually depicted that, other than, Isaiah 9:10, which is what he bases basically all the harbingers around, is that judgment of Isaiah 9:10. The Isaiah 9:10 effect is what he calls it. Well, in Isaiah 9:10, this is what they said. This is what the Bible says. It says, quote, "The bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild with dressed stone. The fig trees have been felled, but we will replace them with cedars." Okay, so the bricks have fallen down, and he relates that to the breach, or the first strike that the Assyrians took against Israel, the northern kingdom. And that's the parallel with 9/11, the Arab terrorists strike on the Twin Towers, where the bricks fell there. Well, like I said, I couldn't find an exact, connection in terms of an actual breach of a wall or anything like that. However, that would be assumed that would happen, that during that first strike in 732 BC was, attack on the walls, and the walls were breached, and the enemy came and took over, or started to, because that's when the campaign actually started. And so I see that happening. I just couldn't find exact breaching of walls anywhere. Now there could be, I just could not find it in my limited time to research this. So that's the breach, okay? And the author is trying to connect the breach, or the strike, to God removing his hedge of protection around a nation. And in these two cases, the parallel is he removed the hedge of protection around the nation of Israel. Now again, this is a split nation at this time. It's only the northern kingdom, right now with that actual timeline of 732 BC, that strike or that attack or that campaign by the Assyrians was only for the northern kingdom. And so eventually they attempted to move it down to the southern kingdom, but it was unsuccessful, and with the Syrians anyway, at that time. And so 732 BC is just related to the northern kingdom. So I guess he's more talking about God removing the hedge of protection. Again, it's not the whole nation though, because the whole nation is split right now at this time. So, but in terms of being a strike or an attack, that's what appears to have happened with the Assyrian army attacking Israel and Aram, which is another nation that tried to defy the Assyrians there. And so I could see the connection with the Lord removing the hedge of protection around both nations, America and with Israel. So that's the connection there, and that's what he's basically talking about. And again, like I had mentioned before, the Arab terrorists that attacked on 9/11 in America are descendants of the Assyrians, per his claim. And now some of the research, I went to look for people that opposed what Jonathan Cahn was trying to say, and I found someone who did oppose what he was talking about in regards to terrorists. Now, give me a second here, and I'll look it up with the terrorists. Or maybe I should actually talk about that, because that's the other harbingers there. So maybe I'll bring it up in the next harbinger that we're going to talk about. So yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do, because we actually talk about it. But is it related? Do we think that it is something that is connected? The strike? Yeah, I could see how he could connect the campaign that started in 732 BC, because eventually it culminated when the northern kingdom was destroyed, completely overrun by the Assyrians in 722 BC, which is 10 years later. So 732 was the initial beginning of the campaign. So I could see how he could connect, okay, that's the first, real strike against the northern kingdom. I could see that. Now, when it comes to 9/11, is 9/11 the first major strike from terrorists? And I could see that connection there too, being a strike from terrorists. And also, matching up the fact that Assyrians were terrorists and the Arabs were descendants of these same people. So I could see a connection there. Now, when we're talking about hedge of protection being removed and then a strike against America, that's a little bit tougher, because you have Pearl Harbor, which that was a major strike against America, and we didn't know about it and all that. So was the hedge of protection removed at that time? Or how could the hedge of protection be removed on 9/11 when we were struck, back in 1941 when the Japanese struck Pearl Harbor? So the hedge of protection falls a little bit short there, but what doesn't fall short is the fact that he is saying that a strike from terrorists, from the Assyrians or the Assyrians' descendants. Now, I could see how the attack on Pearl Harbor wouldn't fall into that, because it wasn't done by terrorists. So that's where I could see, okay, maybe not the hedge of protection, but the first strike done by terrorists, I could see that. Well, anyways, we're out of time, so kind of ponder on that. Think about what we just spoke about in regards to the first strike or the campaigns and the parallel between ancient Israel being attacked by terrorists, the Assyrians, that first strike where the hedge of protection was removed, and then also 9/11 and our hedge of protection being removed on that date as well. Okay, until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and keep seeking liberty. For another episode of the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to get in touch, email us at info@clintarmitage.com.